On behalf of over 17,000 students at Douglas College, thank you for the opportunity to bring forward our suggestions to address the needs of post-secondary education here in New Westminster, Coquitlam, and the entire province. We are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Kakai and Coquitlam First Nation, which lies across the shared territories of the Swallowtoot, Katsi, Musqueam, Kakite, Squamish, and Starlo nations. We hope you consider affordability and sustainability of post-secondary education in British Columbia for the budget in 2022. This will support the economic recovery of our communities by strengthening access to education and increasing knowledge outcomes that will have a lasting and positive impact for the future of our province.
Throughout my life as a post-secondary domestic student, I've experienced many struggles with tuition fees, and I know many of my fellow domestic students are in the same boat. Many students do not have parental support, and this leaves the burden on the students to make ends meet. The recent COVID-19 pandemic resulted in an additional barrier for students with layoffs and lack of jobs. Many students need to take a year off school to afford their education, and also many students exceed 4 years to obtain their bachelor's degree. 56.4% of first-year students in 2015 did not achieve their bachelor's degree by the end of 2019. And according to Statistics Canada, a domestic student pays on average $6,500 every 2 semesters on course fees. And this does not include textbooks or any other expenses. With all these expenses students must manage, they start to lose balance in their lives when it comes to physical activity and their social lives. When I started post-secondary education, I had no idea how much it was going to cost me. I knew textbook fees and tuition fees were 2 separate entities, but I did not know I would be spending up to $400 on textbooks every semester. I spent nearly 1/5 of the cost of my course load on textbooks when I took the mandatory math and English courses for my degree. This became a huge financial burden on me and delayed my education because I had to take the summer off to afford classes in the fall semester, which ultimately delayed my graduation. Unfortunately, I am not alone. Many students have the same experiences as me, and many students only complete their diploma and drop out of their bachelor's degree because they cannot afford the upper level course fees for their undergraduate degree. The increasing cost of living is an additional strain on students, especially here in the Lower Mainland. I am lucky enough to live with my parents, however, many other students are not that lucky. Rent exceeds $1,000 a month for a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom basement, and that does not include any other necessities such as food, heating, or Wi-Fi. This forces students to take up part-time coursework and prolong their time in the PSE system. Being a student today costs more than any other generation before us, and we need government support. Giving students non-repayable grants can go a long way in aiding students with their expenses and allowing them to not be concerned about missing their payments on bills or courses in college. It's an investment into this generation to build stronger communities for the future of this province.
We would also like the committee to consider financial aid for international students, similar to the aid domestic students have access to. The provision of financial aid will provide sufficient assistance for international students as they navigate the numerous barriers they face. International students encounter a lot of financial burdens during their time of study. One major burden is the lack of predictability of tuition. And so, a lot of international students either must choose to skip the semester, take unfavorable loans, or work odd jobs to fund their education. Access to financial aid can alleviate the pressures of tuition and enable international students to continue their studies as planned. As an international student myself, I have had to depend on work and my family to support my education, but I know that there are a lot of international students who pay out of pocket to fund their own education. Coupled with restrictions on work hours for international students, some form of international aid is the major way to solve this problem. Financial aid to international students will demonstrate that the BC government is interested and invested in providing equitable education for all.
I am an international student from India, and I've never been able to predict my tuition fees, and that causes me anxiety. Budgeting for my education has always been unstable, and just like me, a lot of international students face the same issue. A lot of international students also end up working over hours or working under the table only to pay their tuition fees. We are cash cows to many post-secondary educations here in British Columbia. As an international student, I'm only allowed to work 20 hours a week. And due to the limited job experiences from our home countries, a lot of us work minimum wage jobs, and that only covers food and necessities. Some students resort to working under the table at unsafe job locations, and that eventually ends up affecting their visa. That ultimately also affects their permanent residency applications and work visas. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Focusing on helping our families and paying our own tuition fees, international students like me are not able to focus on what they're here for, their education. A regulation on international tuition and putting a cap on international tuition fees will not only benefit international students, and it will also benefit the college, as more international students will be likely attending the post-secondary educations with this system. It will also encourage them to eventually move and settle in Canada and contribute to the overall economy of the country.
To be straightforward, the funding model for post-secondary education needs fixing. In the last 50 years, the proportion of funding to post-secondaries in BC has dropped from 90% in the 1970s to just 43.6% today. That is almost a 50% decrease. In addition, specifically between 2000 and 2016, provincial funding of post-secondary tuition decreased by 24%. To fill in this revenue gap, institutions increased tuition fees of international students, and now international fees account for about 25% of BC post-secondary's operational budgets. This is incredibly unsustainable, as international fees are not guaranteed, and it is a clear example of how a lack of government funding has incentivized institutions to increase tuition fees, which is happening at a rate that outpaces inflation by every metric. Altogether, these facts illustrate that today's generation of students are facing an unprecedented amount of financial pressure that no past generation has had to go through. Personally, COVID struck me and my family pretty hard. My physical and mental health suffered, and during 2 separate semesters, I dropped from full-time status as a student to part-time status. When this happens during a semester wherein a student has received full-time student loans, they receive a strike on the record with Student Aid BC. And 2 strikes on a student's record removes their eligibility from receiving student loans again, until they fully complete 2 full-time semesters at their own expense. Unfortunately, this is exactly what happened to me, and as a result, I dug into my savings to pay for my last 2 semesters. But with my lesson workload at my job, my only choice this upcoming semester was to take it part-time in order to recover the money I've spent into my education, thus delaying my graduation. From speaking with a few of my classmates, I realized my story is not exactly unique. Many of my classmates have shared similar stories with me of needing to take a semester off or part-time in order to deal with financial hardships, definitely related to the cost of their education. With the pandemic having upheaved so many aspects of our lives, it is a critical time for the government to take a step back and see which aspects of society need help. Now, the students of today are graduating with the highest levels of debt ever seen, more so than any generation to come before us. As the financial burdens become a harder weight to bear, many students prolong their education, delaying their graduation, and enter the workforce later. By entering the workforce later and needing to pay off these high levels of debt, students contribute less to the economy. This cycle is not conducive to seeing our society and economy grow. In the past, BC government has made 3 commitments. 1, to make BC more affordable. 2, to deliver services people can rely on, and 3, to build a strong, innovative economy that works for everyone. These 3 commitments can be fulfilled through properly investing and improving the BC public post-secondary system. Areas of our economy are suffering, and the government can properly fix up those areas. Post-secondaries are critical in training and retraining those people who will refortify our economy. Thus, education should be a cornerstone of BC's upcoming plan to seek a stronger and better future for us all.